Nightjar Nights has helped reacquaint me with this strange, elusive species. I say strange, but the words spectral and uncanny might also be apt. The nightjar is a bird which has always haunted our imaginations because of the ways in which it inhabits the borders of what we think of as knowable. So a creature which is active in the twilights of dusk and dawn is always likely to hover between superstition and actuality. Sarah Hudston's contributions capture with precision the liminal nature of the bird, as does Cosmo Sheldrake's soundscape, an eerie rethinking of the dawn chorus. Tim Kohler's report from Humber Head Reserve reminds us of its existence on another border, its precarious presence in our ecosystem, due in part to the vulnerability of the habitat on which it depends. Anita Roy's beautiful creation myth taps into the nightjar's metaphysical presence as she connects it by a thread to the moon, so that it becomes a fascinatingly displaced and resonant exiled identity. The children of Hatfield Woodhouse School, while eagerly reaching to understand the nightjar's habits and geography, are clearly engaged imaginatively with its migration and, most movingly, with its average lifespan of just 4 years. Their magic lanterns recreate the atmospheric location of the bird, its silhouette projected through the crepuscular light. Even the practical activity of catching and ringing specimens lends itself to the poetic, when Jane Addams informs us they caught nightjars in soft mist nets. David Higgins's helpful, brief literary history of the nightjar begins with the 18th century naturalist Gilbert White attempting to release the bird from mystery and legend through the power of disciplined observation, so that we can see it as a dynamic, living creature rather than as a dead specimen. One of the things with which White has to negotiate is the problem of names. As Stephen Moss points out, the very fact that the bird has so many names, despite its elusive nature, and many of them reaching out to the borders of our imagination, is part of what makes it so special to us. Goatsucker, gabble ratchet, dewfall owl, fern owl, litchfowl, razor grinder, screech hawk, moth gobbler. Not just the number of names, but the peculiarity of the names and their associations with death and the dead makes the bird something different, gives it its peculiar resonance in our minds. This capacity of a species to occupy and haunt our minds is something familiar, I think, to most amateur naturalists and birdwatchers, and is not unique to the nightjar. When I was a child, I pored over the rather dull little brown job of the Observer's Book of Birds. A few birds were depicted in colour, bullfinches surrounded by apple blossom, linnets on gorse. Most appeared only in black and white, and rarities might not be illustrated at all. Then there were oddities. For me, the nightjar came into that category, along with the wryneck. Species which might almost challenge the category of bird because of their physical and behavioural idiosyncrasies. I was yet to have my imagination triggered by its strangely elongated middle toe. As I remember it, the nightjar appeared in black and white, and appeared rather inert, in flight but without its characteristic gape. On the basis of this little book and an artist's impression, the different birds began to be established in one's head. If I was to see a bullfinch, would it be perched in apple blossom? Would a linnet grace the gorse bush? In the unlikely event that I encountered a nightjar, how would I recognise its movement in flight? Cameos of rural England filled my mind as the places in which I might see these exotic species. I mention this to point up the importance of our minds in the business of seeing, observing and spotting birds, or indeed any other species that we are interested in. It is a heavily predetermined thing. Every birdwatcher will know the power of the mind working in conjunction with the eye to want to see a new species, the discipline needed to hold back from making too much of nothing, and the need to face up to honest disappointment. Every day on natural history blogs, there are hundreds of people asking if they've seen a golden eagle when they've only encountered a buzzard. Though they might now be condescending in response to such a category mistake, every true birdwatcher remembers, and quite likely still encounters, the power of anticipation and the way in which a raptor, sailing high in the sky with no point of comparison, can lead the mind to play tricks and succumb to wish fulfillment. And so back to my encounters with nightjars, a bird, as I've suggested, which carries more than the usual freight of distorting anticipation along with it. Even if we as good naturalists might want to leave folklore and superstition behind, in its case there is the twilight and the seeming unbirdlike oddity of its behaviour, so that in our imaginations it hovers between an owl, a hawk and a cuckoo. Over the years, I've walked a number of heathland areas in search of nightjars with no luck whatsoever. I've visited Skipwith Common in North Yorkshire on numerous occasions when everything looked right. Warm summer evenings, bell heather, a stand of ancient Scots pines majestically rising from the unmistakable lowland heath habitat, and moths aplenty, but never a nightjar in sound or sight. And then there's the other side of spotting or encountering a species, particularly one you've longed to see. When it happens, it's certain. You know it's not a buzzard. And very often, especially if you're not a twitcher, it will happen when you're not expecting it. Like a gift. That was my first experience of the nightjar. We were a family with small children camping in Dalby Forest, near Rosedale, on the edge of the North York moors. The girls had just got off to sleep, and we were hoping for a peaceful night. No sooner had we zipped up the outer flap than I heard a strange mechanical sound, like a generator. My first instinct was to assume that a peculiarly antisocial camper was deploying some new techie gadget at everyone else's expense, and so I emerged from the flap flush with indignation. A brief exploration of the site revealed nothing. I remembered something which resembled an electricity substation down the track, but again, nothing. And then it hit me as a sudden, self-chastening revelation. This strange mechanical sound was a nightjar churring. No sign of it, but it had made its mark in my mind and answered in this self-correcting way part of the quest I'd been set upon for years. As if the spell had suddenly been broken, the next evening we were driving back from the pub in Rosedale through the forest, and there it was, haunting the glade between the plantations, floating and flickering in the strange substance of half-light, like some phosphorescent hawk.